Commissioner Tim Echols, we are, at the time this publishes, just a few days away from Election Day. You're running to keep your seat on the Public Service Commission. Let's start here. Thanks for joining us on the Georgia Vote. We appreciate it.
It's the most publicity the Public Service Commission has ever received. So I'm thrilled that the stature of the commission is going up.
You've been on the commission for just about 15 years now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this will be the first time you will be at the top of the ballot when voters go to decide who's going to be on this commission.
Yeah, normally we're in an even year. We've got the governor ahead of us, the president ahead of us, but this year, because of the lawsuits surrounding the at-large nature of the commission, we were thrown into an odd-year election with all of these cities. And I sure hope the legislature knew what they were doing, because it doesn't feel very good right now.
That's interesting that you say it doesn't feel good for somebody who's been in office so long. Correct me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but it sounds like you have some trepidation about your chances in this race.
I do have trepidation because despite me, being the consumer watchdog and, overseeing the building of a nuclear plant that no one else in America has been able to build, moving us to 7th in solar, the only thing my opponents are concerned about is that power bill, and they're waving that power bill in front of people's face and saying, this is the only thing we want you to look at. Don't worry about reliability. Don't worry about those nuclear plants. Don't worry about preparing for the future. Just worry about your own personal bill, and we're going to lower that. There's no way they can lower that power bill.
Let's spend a moment, and I want to talk about a lot because there's a lot to discuss in the world of power and power regulation. But let's spend a moment talking about the affordability issue. Leading up to the 2024 election, we talked to a whole heck of a lot of voters in that race, and they said affordability, probably more than any other issue, was top of mind for them. We're in a new year here, but a lot of people are still concerned about affordability. You just said there is no way to lower the power rates in Georgia for consumers. What makes you say that?
Well, you would have to cut our reserve margin from 26% to down to 10 or 5% and put us on such a narrow margin that the least little thing would trigger California-style brownouts in Oakland, San Francisco, LA. Just Google them. They have them. Not every day, not most days, but they have them on the hottest days of the summer. And I don't think Georgia is ready for that. So, everything has gone up in price. The McDonald's dollar menu's gone. Your Netflix subscription is higher. Cars, of course. Your house has doubled in price in the last 5 years. Clothes are higher. Haircuts are higher. I get my haircut at Great Clips. They've gone up again. Everything has gone up. How could the energy sector possibly avoid the inflation that's happened out there, especially coming out of the Biden administration with all these strict rules that he's put on coal plants and gas plants? We've had to pay that, and we pass it along to the consumer.
I want to ask you one more direct question on this, because I know there are going to be some viewers who hear what you're saying. They're going to nod their heads and say, okay, I get that. I know, and there are going to be other people who watch this interview, and they'll think, as the AP reported, I think there have been 6 rate hikes in recent years here. People are going to say that their power bills have gone up, and they're going to see that you've been in office almost 15 years. They may blame you for a more expensive power bill. What would you say to those voters?
Look, it's not 6 rate hikes. We've had two of the increases come from nuclear plants going into rates, finishing. By law, we had to put those into rates. My opponents count that as a rate increase. My opponents count the Ukrainian conflict that's caused natural gas to spike in America because France and Portugal and the Netherlands aren't buying Russian gas. They're buying U.S. gas, and it's impacted our market. We really had one increase coming out of 2022, out of the pandemic, when everything was high, toilet paper, eggs, everything. We even waited until the pandemic was over before having that impact. And we did it in a 3-step increase. My opponents count that as 3 rate increases. Of course they do. They're trying to take me out of office. So they're going to do anything they can to distort my record, to not talk about reliability and the importance of the way that we do things in Georgia. We are the #1 state to do business in America. We're 7th in solar. We have the largest clean energy plant in America. Why would you want to change commissioners when you have someone like me that's a consumer watchdog, that puts my cell phone number out there, that takes people's calls, that solves their problems. I don't know why anyone would want to change, other than the fact that they've been brainwashed into thinking that what my opponents are saying is true, and it is not true.
People do get their power bills every month, though, and you say you take issue with the notion that there have been 6 rate hikes. People do see their bills going up. Are they being brainwashed by the bills they're seeing?
No, we've had the hottest summer, hottest July that we've ever had before. I mean, you are paying for what you are getting. We are still we're still in the top 20 for lowest energy cost in America. We have just frozen the rates for 3 years. No other state's doing that. If you don't believe me, just Google California energy prices, Google New York energy prices. We are still below the national average, yet we've made so much progress in terms of building out a grid that's prepared for the future. We're open for business in Georgia. There's a lot of states that aren't open for business. Why? They've demonized fossil fuel. They've said it's evil, it's immoral. We don't say that here. We are going to use the cheapest form of energy that we can to make life better for you.
You mentioned fossil fuel. I think you said something at a rally in October I want to ask you about. You were talking about your opponent, Alicia Johnson, the Democrat challenging you in this race. And you said, this is a quote, "If these 2 Democrats get elected, they are going to be at war with our fossil plants." That's a pretty strong statement. What did you mean by that?
Look where Democrats run utility infrastructure. Out west, Washington, Oregon, California, New England, they don't like fossil fuels. They've closed coal plants. They're gone. All of them are gone in those areas. And the wicked step-brother of coal, as far as Democrats are concerned, is natural gas. Natural gas is so clean. There's no ash, hardly any particulate matter. Atlanta is running on it right now as I speak. There's been nothing that's helped Atlanta's pollution more than converting Plant McDonough from coal to natural gas. Democrats don't like it. My Democrat opponents will be under pressure from the Democratic establishment to close fossil plants. Peter Hubbard, running against my colleague Fitz Johnson, said he wants the state to be 65% solar. California's not even 65% solar. How are you going to do that? How are you going to run the grid, bring in manufacturers, keep voltage where it needs to be with that much solar? Look, no one has been greener than me. I have solar on my house. I've had 8 electric vehicles. My opponent has neither. But you cannot go to 65% solar in Georgia without putting this grid in jeopardy. And it will cause rates to go up. And what's worse, it's going to impact reliability.
I'm glad you bring that up because you have been an outspoken advocate for solar power. I think on one of your websites, in your bio, I should say, on the PSC site, you have a line saying that in 2020, Conservatives for Clean Energy dubbed you the solar architect of Georgia. You're also a staunch conservative. There aren't a ton of outspoken green energy advocates in the modern conservative wing of the Republican Party, but you are one. How do you occupy that space?
It's been a little controversial with my Republican friends, but we have done solar below the avoided cost of energy, meaning we haven't subsidized it. See, that's the difference between the Georgia way and the West Coast way. They subsidize it, we don't. We are not having a cost shift where you're paying for my solar. We are making solar stand on its own, and we're building it in massive fields in South Georgia. So sure, we're 47th in rooftop solar, but when it comes to the big fields that really make a difference, we're 7th in the nation. That's something we can be proud of. With a red state run by Republicans with 5 Republican commissioners, to be 7th in the nation, people have got to ask themselves, how did you do that? How did you accomplish that? We made solar compete. And we're about 7% solar in Georgia, and it's working.
Let me ask you, you bring up the fact that we're in a red state. Democrats would take some issue with that, looking at some recent federal races, but statewide it has undeniably tilted conservative for the better part of the last 2 decades. 5 GOP commissioners on the PSC right now. You have been an outspoken partisan in this race. And I want to direct your attention to a comment you made on an AJC podcast. You said over the summer, you said you felt like you were a little too nice. And you went on to say things have changed since the June election. And you said, this is a quote of yours, "We're attempting to scare our Republican base that, look, if we lose this, bad things are happening." What did you mean by that?
Well, one of the things that was so controversial is that my opponent, on her resume, called herself a DEI specialist and how she had incorporated DEI principles into healthcare companies that she had worked for. And I felt like, you know what? If you're bragging about it, I think I'm going to mention it. I think I'm going to mention it to Republicans who don't much like DEI at all. So we brought this up and really extrapolated what might happen if my opponent gets on there. For example, forgiving the arrearages of low-income people who get behind. That is a kind of an energy justice thing. It happens in other states. Increasing the subsidies for low-income ratepayers is kind of an energy justice thing. And so if my opponent knows nothing about energy, and she doesn't, she said as much, what will she bring? She will bring her expertise, her DEI expertise. So I don't think Republicans are ready for that. I actually don't think the average ratepayer wants to cover the cost of someone else's power bill. But that's exactly what that is. The utility is not a charity. The government is not a charity. They're going to make other people pay for low-income customers' arrearages. And I just don't think that's a smart thing to do. We've never done it before. I mean, yeah, we've tripled the solar. I mean, we've tripled the senior discount. We have added a low-income discount. I have been responsible for giving millions to the Salvation Army. I personally contribute to them every month for their project share. But I don't think it's the government's job, nor do I think it's the power company's job to cover low-income customer bills.
I'm glad you bring that comment up. I want to ask you about this because Alicia Johnson responded to your comment calling her a DEI specialist, and she said, and this is a quote, she said, "I would classify, and most people would classify, those comments as racist MAGA dog whistles." Is she right about that?
Look at my family picture with my 7 children and some of their spouses and tell me I'm a racist. I am not. You know, my daughter's married to an African American. I am not a racist, and I don't have racial prejudice. So, look, she won't admit she's going to do this. She pulled down her resume so no one could see it. I have screenshots of it. I've shared it with all the media here in Atlanta. So, and I don't think it's the most egregious thing that she could do. I think the most egregious thing is for Georgia's reliability to be impacted by a policy of moving away from fossil fuel and nuclear and moving more towards a complete dominance of solar and batteries. I just don't think we can run this grid in that way.
I wonder if there may be, and I'd love your response to this, I wonder if there may be some people who maybe have never even heard of the PSC race in past years. They're paying attention now because the PSC race, through a quirk of the calendar, is top of the ticket. They hear the tenor of the debate and the clashes between you and your opponent. I wonder if there might be some voters who think, boy, this is an awfully partisan tenor for a race on a seat on a board that's main job is regulating power entities. It sounds pretty sleepy. How has it gotten so partisan?
Most states, the governor appoints commissioners. This is one of the few states that is partisan. And I think anytime anything is partisan in this hyper-partisan culture that we live in, it's going to eventually go to that. I don't think there's any way to avoid it. And I'm a Republican. I wear that brand. She's a Democrat. She wears that brand. There is some loyalty that you must show to those parties, the constituents in those parties, the leaders of those parties. I just don't think there's any way to avoid it. I think what could happen in the future if the Democrats take over the commission, Georgia might go the way of appointing commissioners. I mean, there's been pressure before. There are legislators that want that, to make it less partisan. And, you know, I would be happy either way. I'm serving at the pleasure of the people. So, you know, I love this job. I've spent a lot of time developing expertise at this job. I want to keep it at least for 5 more years.
Let me ask you just a few more questions. I always, of course, want to be respectful of your time. You mentioned a moment ago, you said that your opponent has no experience in the energy sector. Before you won your seat on the PSC, did you have any experience in the energy sector?
No. I was a nonprofit executive. I knew how to get elected. And, in this race, and as any race that someone runs for, you need to be careful about what you are considering, and you can always learn on the fly. And I have no doubt that my opponent can learn on the fly, just like I did. But Georgia's at a pivotal time. We've got a tremendous amount of data center load coming, and we've got to do this right. We do not want to have any stranded assets. We don't want to have ratepayers holding the bag for these data centers, and that's why we've gotten really, really tough with them. I mean, I've spent most of my life working with young people. I spent my 30s and 40s building a national youth organization. I'm kind of a Batman commissioner. I regulate energy in the daytime, and I fight human trafficking at night. That's one of my big issues. My daughter is also in the Justice Department doing this every day. So, it's such an important issue to me. I'm blessed to have been able to serve in this job, and I hope I'll be able to continue.
And you're talking about your experience founding and leading Teen Pact, right?
Teen Pact, and then the Unholy Tour, which is the 10-year basically bus tour that I do in Atlanta, Savannah, Columbus, accentuating what's happening with the blight of human trafficking.
And just for people who may not be familiar, Teen Pact is an organization designed to tell me a little bit about Teen Pact. I don't want to mischaracterize it.
Yeah,
Tell me
I
what
started Teen Pact in 1994 for high school kids to come to the Capitol, not to learn to lobby about any particular issue, but to learn about how the legislature works, to develop a lifelong skill of being able to shake hands with a leader, ask respectful questions, to spend a week at the Capitol knowing, what does the House do? What does the Senate do? What do journalists do? What do lobbyists do? We required them to actually interview 3 lobbyists while they're there, because lobbyists play an important role there as well. Teen Pact is now in all 50 states. It really is more of my legacy, probably even than the nuclear plant that I oversaw.
And it is, I believe on the website, one of the things it's described as is advancing or defending the Christian faith. It's a conservative organization for conservative teens, right?
It is. It's actually a Christian organization. I mean, I don't shrink back. I'm an ordained Southern Baptist minister. My faith is very important to me, and it continues to drive Teen Pact today.
Let's talk about data centers, and let's wrap up here. You brought it up, and it's something that we get a lot of questions about. I bet you get a lot of questions about data centers too.
It's the number one question.
They're big, they're visible, and it feels like more and more are coming or exploring the ability to come to Georgia on a weekly basis now. I may be being a little bit exaggerative, but probably not much. It's a big topic. You said the challenge is making sure the PSC gets this right. Mm-hmm. Can you guarantee right now to a Georgia ratepayer that data centers will not cause their power rates to go up in the future?
Based on the plan that we put in place, based on the testimony of utility executives who were under oath by penalty of perjury, we have set up a plan where those data centers are paying list price. Think about you buying a car. They're not being able to negotiate prices because EMCs are not bidding for data centers in Georgia Power's territory and vice versa. Back in the day, Georgia Power and the EMCs were at each other. They're not fighting over data center load. So data centers are paying a high price, and we're requiring this tremendous security deposit. And think about earnest money when you buy a home, or any kind of security deposit when you get an apartment. We are asking them for an enormous amount of money. Even if they do leave, that's going back in to benefit ratepayers. And then somebody else will come along and use the power. I really think we've done a great job at protecting consumers from rogue data centers.
And obviously it's a big topic and there's a lot going on. I just want to make sure I put a fine point on this. Can you tell ratepayers right now that their rates will not go up because of these data centers?
I can't promise anything in the future, except that one day, Jesus Christ is coming back. That's all I can promise you right there. So we've done our best to make sure to lock in data centers with tight security. But could Google go bankrupt? No one would say they could, but they could. They could. Westinghouse went bankrupt to get out of our contract. So I guess if Westinghouse can go bankrupt, anybody can go bankrupt. But we've tried to do our best to absolutely learn from that lesson and make sure data centers are on the hook for what they're asking for.
And that Westinghouse bankruptcy became a big deal because they were a central component of building Plant Vogel's new nuclear reactors, correct?
And they hung us with almost $800 million of open invoices that they didn't pay. So this is why the nuclear plant costs so much, is because though we had a contract with them, they decided to bankrupt the Westinghouse LLC in America, not in South America, not in Europe, not in China, only here for one reason, to get out of our contract. That's pretty low. That is pretty low. And I had to decide, should we finish it or should we not? And I felt like, you know what, we're going to need the energy. We've already got $5 billion invested. We've got to finish this thing. And by God's grace, we were able to. Georgia Power wrote down a couple of $1 billion. Toshiba wrote down about $5 billion. We got another parental guarantee from Toshiba for $1.62. So even though my opponents say, wow, it's $30 billion, it really wasn't by the time we got all those payments. It was more like 20. So glad to have that done. We'd like to build some more if we are able to get the right financial deal in the future.
We've covered a lot of ground. Let's end here to a voter who has yet to cast a ballot and maybe still has not made up their mind. Your elevator pitch to them would be what?
Well, Georgia's the best place to do business, and every manufacturer that comes in here asks one question: how about that power? Is it ample? Is it reliable? So for Georgia to keep growing, we need to stay on the path that we're on. I mean, I've been able to move Georgia to 7th in solar. I mean, that's quite an accomplishment. We've got the largest clean energy plant in North America, and our rates are below the national average. And as a bonus, we froze Georgia Power's rates for 3 years. Why would you want to change and go with some speculative person because they're promising you something and they have no basis for that? Why would you want to take a chance on the power grid? You don't want to.
Commissioner Tim Echols, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.